too, and really appreciate all the work that you've done in the webinar series for SACSA. So I have the great honor to talk to you a little bit about enrollment management today. And just before I do this, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and my career so you understand kind of where I'm coming from in the presentation. So I have had the opportunity to be part of Old Dominion University for the past 3 years, and in really working to lead a division that really marries all the aspects of enrollment management along with what we think of in the traditional student affairs role, along with areas of support like an area for major exploration. And what I love about that is that it really is about bringing a lot of services together to help students be successful. I had the opportunity to have a similar role when I was the Vice President of Student Affairs at Salisbury University, and have always really enjoyed the marriage between enrollment management and student affairs. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it today. And just because of the amount of time that we do have, it's really going to be a broad overview. We could spend days and weeks talking about it, so this is going to be a really broad overview, but just to really help us link enrollment management with student affairs today. So here we go. I think somebody's going to help make sure I can click these slides. There we are. So one of the things that sometimes happens when we're thinking about enrollment management, I don't know about you, but I've been on campuses where when you hear the term enrollment management, sometimes that sounds kind of technical. It sounds very business oriented, and it doesn't always sound like it really is looking out always even thinking about the students. But when we really break it down and we think about enrollment and what enrollment of a university is our students. And so if we think about enrollment management and what that term means, it's really about managing the life cycle of our students. And what I love about that is it's really thinking about how our students can be successful from the very first point of contact through graduation. And a lot of times we'll hear the term strategic enrollment management. And that's really working with each student population, all the services on campus to look at how they link together in the very best way to bring students to a successful outcome, while also tying in factors like the financial health of the university, the academic curriculum, and bringing all those pieces together. But really at the core, it always goes back to our students and their success. So some of the other terms when we think about enrollment, a lot of times people think that it's admissions, that enrollment and admissions are one and the same. And so I have made a very big statement with my slide here, if you're following along, that enrollment does not equal admissions. Admissions is a part of enrollment management. It's really the very first stage of the student life cycle. It's all about who's coming to the institution. And when we think about the very first stage, we want to think about who are our students, what type of students are coming. Are they undergraduate or graduate, transfers, things like that. And a lot of times there's goals set. How many students do we want to bring into an institution at what period in time? What is important to the institution, and what are the goals of bringing those in? And we also think about who is out there in our marketplace. Who are we recruiting and from where are we recruiting them? So those are some of the things we think about in the beginning, but enrollment encompasses much more than that. And when I think of it from a student affairs point of view, I got a little ahead of myself. One of the things, I'm going to back up a little bit. When I think about it in the broadest terms, we think about it from the very first point of contact through graduation. So the slide that I have up now is really what we call an enrollment funnel. It's where we start with all the possibilities of who could be students at our universities. And we work our way through the cycle to bring the students into the university and to help them graduate. So when we think about a prospect, we think about who is out there in our marketplace. Where are we recruiting, and who are possibilities to come to our universities? And then once we get to that inquiry stage, that's when we start to make contact. The students make contact with the university, and then we hope that they'll become applicants. And as we keep moving through that, we want to help them complete the applications and become admitted to the university. And then We see where they have deposited or confirmed. Many of our universities have deposits to show that the student is coming. And for those of us that don't have deposits, sometimes that can get a little bit trickier. When you think about from the point from when a student's admitted to when a student deposits, that's what we often refer to as the yield rate. How many students choose to come to our university of those that were admitted? Then we bring them in and we enroll them. They continue through their journey of higher education, and eventually they graduate and hopefully go on to very successful lives and continue into graduate school or gainful employment. So if we're thinking about just admissions, we miss the whole point of what it means for a student life cycle as we roll through. But where I was just getting ahead of myself a moment ago is what I like to think of in terms of student affairs and what enrollment management means to us. I think of enrollment management as a success continuum for students. When you think about that, we want to help students be successful from the very first point of contact, the very first time that we are connecting with the student and helping the student learn about the institution, all the way through their time at the institution, how they persist or progress through the institution, and then graduate and become productive alumni. And right now there's increased pressure to show that we have strong career outcomes. When I think about it in terms of what I do every day and why I'm so fortunate to be in such a purposeful profession, the vehicles for this success continuum, I'm a part of each and every day, and I'm sure so is everyone on this webinar. Because the real keys and vehicles here are how students learn, both in and outside of the classroom, how they're served by our universities, and how they engage or connect with it. And whatever profession we're in higher education, we all have an impact on that. But when we're in student affairs, student services, or enrollment management, we really have a strong impact on that each and every day. We're a really big part of that student success continuum. And I really think beyond funnels or words to describe, this is what I think is one of the best ways to think about enrollment management. Helping a student be successful from the very first point of contact all the way through their time at the university, how they persist and progress to graduation and then beyond. That's the success continuum. That's really what enrollment management is all about. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit about who comes to our universities, who we're helping through that success continuum, and what enrollment managers are thinking about. Let's go back to those first point of contacts when we're recruiting students. When we think about that and how we're recruiting students, we want to think about who our university is, what type of university it is, and who it is we're recruiting to the university. And there's so many different types of students. Our institutions, many of us have both freshmen and transfers. And over the past several years, the transfer market has grown on campuses across the country, both public and private, even those that have traditionally only served the freshman students. And many of us also have graduate programs, and we are looking at our master's students, doctoral students, non-degree graduate students, and they're a very important part. We also have to consider what online classes have done and how that's changed who's coming and who's learning and how they prefer to learn. There's also a very big push right now for certificate programs, things of that nature that don't require a degree, and continuing education and those taking courses where their end goal is a certificate is growing like it hasn't been before, and there's a new emphasis on that. So we've got to think about continuing education, what that means. Many of us, like ODU, serve a large military-affiliated population. There's international students, out-of-state students as well as in-state, and adult learners. When I think about who we're serving, that's what we sometimes talk about is what segments of the population we're serving, what markets do they exist in, and then we think about for each of them, how do we recruit them? Enrollment has gotten so much more complex because our students have changed so much. And no matter what type of institution you're at, many of us are finding that more and more in more recent years, we're seeing more women, and many of us are seeing more women than men on our institutions, which is a real shift. And our population, especially in the traditional age population, is becoming more diverse than ever, with increased racial and ethnic diversity, which makes for a great learning environment. Also coming up and who's coming to our universities, we have more of a socioeconomic diversity. And we also have a change in preparedness, those that are prepared to come to the university. So we have many more entering our universities that may not have gotten all that they need in the K-12 system to be prepared for college. We want to think about all of these things because, again, we want to know who is coming to our university, how we're going to recruit them, but more importantly, how are we going to make them successful when they're here and set up the right infrastructure for them once they arrive on our campuses. So with that, I want to just show you a little bit about what's happening nationally and show you an example of what we think about when we think about the term that I call markets. So if we look at this map, and you don't have to study it, or it's just really here to use an example, but basically it's a map showing how the enrollment of the traditional age high school population will change in each state. So some states are really growing, like Texas, and some states are really declining in their high school graduating markets, like Maine. So if we look at this map, that's one of the things an enrollment manager will look at to think about what's happening to a particular population, say in this case, the traditional high school population. They want to look at what's happening not only in their state, but from anywhere that they're recruiting students and see what they need to plan for in the future. One of the things, as I'm going to just show you one more example of this as we go. So if we look at nationally the high school graduate population, we notice that it has been on the decline. And what that means in terms of who's coming in is there's fewer students in the market to come to our universities than there were the year before. When we think about that, and when our universities are thinking about that, that means the people in our admissions office have to think of a few different ways to recruit students. Sometimes they have to look at different segments of the population. Sometimes they have to find ways to gain what we call a greater market share, which means they've got to bring in more students and maybe take students that would normally go to another university and entice them to come to their school. But it's something the university has to plan for and be knowledgeable about to make sure that they're on the right track for the financial well-being of the institution, and again, to make sure that they're preparing for who's coming to the university. One other thing to know about the trending right now is that if we look at the National Student Clearinghouse in general, which tells us who enrolls in the university, it's reported an 8% drop in spring 2014, and it's the 5th consecutive term of enrollment, which is a semester where the population has dropped at our universities. This is something that has higher education leaders looking very closely, because we set up budgets and financial models on who's coming to the university and what the enrollment will be, and it's something that we definitely have to pay attention for as we move forward, is what can we do to keep this number to keep from dropping. Even with that said, the experts tell us that we're not going to see the growth in the coming years that we saw in the previous 10 or 20 years. It's going to be a slow growth, and even though there are markets that are increasing, we're not going to see that exponential growth we once saw. So what are people doing about that? Well, just as I was talking about before, we've got to do what we call, we've got to increase our yield, which means that of those students admitted, we want more to choose to come to our schools, and we've got to identify new markets, new places where we can go and recruit students. We have to look at different ways and tools for which to bring students into the university, and schools are getting very sophisticated on their personalized messaging and tailored events, targeting their outreach to a specific population, and really looking at how they use their financial aid, both merit and need-based aid, to make sure a student wants to come to their school. But if we take a turn and we think about then once we have the students there, some of the really important factors in enrollment are how a student retains, persists and progresses, and graduates from our institutions. So I want to talk just a moment about that. Many of us know each and every day what retention is, and we hear that term used a lot on our campuses. It's one of the measurements that many of the rankings, the areas that rank schools use as a benchmark for campus success. 40% For the national look at retention is looking at first to second year retention rate, which means those that begin at our universities and are full-time, if they return the second year as a sophomore, we call that the freshman to sophomore retention rate. And that's the rate that you'll hear cited for universities. You always want to know what that is on your campus. What's your retention rate? Who starts with you as a full-time freshman and returns their sophomore year? Now, how did this particular benchmark become so important when we have transfers and part-time students and all different types of learners coming to our institution? Well, once upon a time, it was thought about that students that came to our campuses were first-time, full-time freshmen, and they stayed with us 4 years and they graduated. We also knew that the student was most at risk in the first year. We hear this cited many times, how the first 3 weeks are the most important, the first 6 weeks, those first moments. And now we know that really retention begins before a student even comes to school. Really from the first point of contact, we're starting to retain them. And that's the time when a student is most vulnerable. Then we want to think about how a student persists and progresses. I like the term progress because it means that we're making progress towards something as opposed to just persisting. So how does a student move forward through their college career? And now there is a lot of pressure being put on us, both by our states and at the national level, as well as for both private and publics by our boards, to look at time to degree. How quickly does a student progress? Are they finishing their degree within 4 years if they're a traditional freshman? How long is it taking a part-time student to move through? These are things we're looking at, and it's really important to pay attention in terms of there are limits now on how long students can get financial aid dollars at the federal level, and states are also putting some restrictions on this. So the idea is the student comes in and gets quite serious about what he or she is doing and is on track to finish in a timely manner. A lot of times you'll hear people refer to time to degree. And then we talk about graduation. Is the student graduating? And a lot of the national benchmarks look at 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates. And the standard really has been to look at a 6-year graduation rate in judgment of a university and its success with students. There's a lot of thought being put into the importance of a 4-year graduation rate, but many of us are saying that students need different amounts of time to finish, and we should look at it across the board. But these are the typical things we look at as we talk about students completing, and oftentimes you'll hear it called RPG, retention, progression, and graduation. Are students coming in, are they staying through that critical first year? Are they progressing in time toward their degree, and are they successfully graduating? So when we think about a student moving through and being retained and graduating, more and more right now what we're seeing is a real focus on the data and how we use the data. I talked to you about how important that was when we think about it at the admission stage, who is in our environment and how do we recruit them. Data is so important, and some might say even more important, as we're thinking about how we retain students. It is so important in using our resources effectively, but mostly it's really making sure that what we're doing is making a difference. So we want to target our programs, not look at a one-size-fits-all. And more you'll hear universities talk about predictive models. And basically what that is looking at the risk factors, looking at many different factors which students come in with, and finding out what the risk factors are for students on our campuses. An example for this, at ODU, we looked at 80 factors, and we can look at and see which residence hall students were more successful in previous years. We can also know that if a student comes to us from out of state, that they may be more at risk, and we need to be helpful in helping them progress, retain, progress, and graduate. And we can target those programs. We also know, we even know that if a certain amount of financial need is met for a student, what that break point is and if they'll be more likely to graduate. By knowing what this is about, you can really help students be successful, and you can have more of an impact. When I think of our offices and student affairs, you can do this at an office level. You can find out what residence hall programs are most effective. You can find out which residence halls, is there a trend where students in certain residence halls are more successful? Are students that live on your campus more likely to be retained than students that live off? You can do this for your individual offices and look at the effects of your programs, and are you able to target programs to certain populations? We definitely know from the literature, and we've been able to define this on ODU's campus, that students that are engaged are more likely to be successful. And we can show the data to particular programs as well as across the board. So just some examples of some retention strategies. I mentioned a financial aid, looking at students with need and how much need they have, and how much financial aid makes a difference in retaining that student. Engagement is so powerful, and we know this, and we can look at students that are more likely at risk of not being engaged and target programs towards them, and we can also look at the programs that we have in engagement and see how effective they are. We all know that first-year experience programs are highly effective, and so many of us work in these areas. Living learning communities is always an opportunity for a great partnership and collaboration with academic affairs, and the national research shows us that students that are part of living learning communities are more likely to be retained. We want to make sure that we're targeting our programs to diverse learners. On our campus, we even have differing programs for those that are online. Our military students, we have a different orientation program for them, and special programs targeted toward transfer students. So you can really take this across the board and make sure that you're targeting programs for diverse learners. Academic advising has never been more important than it is before, especially when we're thinking about time to degree. And of course, supplemental instruction shows so much promise in the data we have nationally, and also as well as the studies we've done on our campus. And this is where you're really helping support a particular class with peer instruction that's happening outside of the classroom. So if we've thought about how important it is to retain and get students through that first year to second year and have them return to our campus. And if your campus is like mine, we are right now trying to make sure we take that snapshot on our census date to see how many students have come back and what our retention rate will be. But just as important are making sure that students progress beyond that and graduate. And you'll hear many say that if a student makes it to the junior year, that is really a sure sign of success on many campuses. A student is very likely to complete if they re-enter in their junior year. But with this, we also want to think about programs targeted at time to degree. And in doing that, we want to examine our institutional policies and practices. Are they set up to encourage a student to maximize his or her time on campus? Are we offering courses when needed? Do we think about when a student is becoming a sophomore and junior status? Is our curriculum helping move them forward? We want to continue to review that data and making sure that we are looking at what helps a student be on the right track record. And we also want to know the institutional culture and making sure that we're creating a culture that is about success, that is about progressing, and that is about helping a student progress in as efficient way as possible while still taking full advantage of the learning environment. And of course, I think I already mentioned, but course availability is so important in this. And the reason I just bring up a few of these examples is one of the most important things that we want to think about when we're helping students retain, progress, and graduate is that many different facets play into that. Everything from how we offer a course, when we offer a course, to how we engage a student and serve a student, how we help students learn in and outside the classroom. So many things play into that role to help us bring people forward and move them towards student success. And I just have to go off on a side note here. about the picture that's up here. Actually, that is not a picture of a student there, but a student of life. That is a SACSA member, Corey Baker, when he was at SACSA this year and attended a football game, and I just could not help but show off him cheering for the success of the Monarchs right there. So I can't hear you, but I just hope all of you are laughing. So with that note, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just comment just for a moment as we're going through this overview to give you to look a bit at what are some of the internal demands we think about, some of the pragmatic things that we think about when we're thinking about enrollment management. Well, the term managing seats, that is really where do we have room in the classroom? Do we have enough classes for our students? Do we have enough courses on our campus, or in ODU's case, on our campuses? Do we have enough course availability online? And that's not something we always think about, but I think it's just important to mention that we have our colleagues that are really thinking about how we are laying out the curriculum, and are we able to offer the courses for our students when they need them. If I have colleagues from orientation and transition programs on the line, or academic advisors on the line with us today, you know all too well what that means in helping a student either begin or progress at the university. And we have to think about what this means for our auxiliary services. What does this mean in housing when we're thinking of enrollment? I know that I've been on many campuses where, the housing folks feel like sometimes, where did these students come from, and did anybody warn them that they were coming, and how are they going to create these triples to accommodate either new student or returning student enrollment? But when we're thinking about student success and we're thinking about the enrollment continuum, we really want to think of every aspect, and that includes who should live in our housing, what is most important for students to be successful, who do we offer those beds to when there's a limited supply, and how do we manage that? And I really want to take my hat off to the housing professionals that have to model that every year and really think about sometimes when there's a very limited supply, who gets to sleep in that bed. And then we also want to make sure we're managing dining. Who's going to be in our dining halls? Who are we going to be able to serve them all? Right now we just went through a dining master plan on our campus. So we have to think about who's coming in the future, what are the projections of students. And we're thinking about things like if any of you work in construction, whether we're building a residence hall, a new university center, whether we're building a new dining facility, what does that mean in terms of future enrollment, and how important that complement is to serving the students that we bring in, the students that we have, and making sure we're offering enough without offering too much. So that's one of those pieces just to be aware that is always something that has to be thought about. But then I want to turn our attention a bit for the next few minutes on external demands. So why are we talking about all of this now? Why has enrollment management really become at the forefront more than ever before? Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit to the beginning when I said enrollment does not equal admissions. Because once upon a time, we really thought about it in that way. It was about how many students you had, and you would bring in new students to fill in wherever you had the opportunity. So it was really about a number of students, and you would recruit students to fill in that number. You weren't always thinking about how or there wasn't the same pressures nationally, not that many of us didn't think about it through our professional careers, about how they were completing and what was happening to those students once they were on our campus. And that has really changed. And there's a lot of external demands that have been placed on that. One, for some of our publics in different states, we now have what's called performance funding. And as we think about performance funding, that's really, once upon a time, many of our states and state schools were funded on the concept of how many students you had. And now it's how many students complete and in what time period they complete. So a lot is being looked at also in some performance measures. Some states are looking at, and are students gaining jobs after they graduate? are they successful after they graduate? So these performance measures for some of my colleagues at state schools have really stepped up. Tennessee is a prime example, and I worked in Tennessee for 10 years, and at that time about 10% of our budget was based on performance funding, and now it's really become a leader in the nation for performance funding for the entire higher ed budget. We've got a lot of different federal and state mandates, and whether you're at a public or a private, a lot of this is being tied to financial aid dollars. So it affects us all. There is the college completion agenda that has been put forward through the White House, and the White House scorecard, so that people can go online anywhere and everywhere and look at how we're doing. As I said a moment ago, this ties to Title IV funds, which is how we fund our financial aid. It's also tied, as I mentioned before, to career outcomes. There was really a moment by an address by President Obama to the joint session of Congress in 2009, where he talked about in 2020, America will once again have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world. And he asked and called upon Americans to commit at least 1 year or more to higher education or career training. And every American needs more than a high school diploma. He's really made this a part of his presidency in pushing forward the college completion agenda. And to just show you why, if we look at where the United States has been, we used to be number one in college completion. We were always at the top of the list. And in recent years, we've dropped a bit behind other countries. We have been stagnant in our degree completion across the nation, really leveling off while other countries have moved forward. So let's see a little bit more about what the White House scorecard means to us. As I mentioned, it was introduced by our president in 2013, and he's really focused on raising the worldwide ranking of the U.S. and number of degrees earned. The White House scorecard was introduced to allow families to evaluate colleges and universities based on return on investment, or ROI. And I know for some of us, or I'll speak for myself, sometimes I don't always appreciate that what we're doing and what we're a part of in higher education is equated with ROI. But there's so much out there, whether within our states, by our boards, at the federal level, that really looks at how this all relates to return on investment. You hear this on the news all the time. So the measures include costs of our schools, graduation rates, loan default rates. We hear a lot about indebtedness right now, average amount that a student borrows, and employment after graduation. So this is really what's moving forward, and it's really putting in very pragmatic terms what is happening or what higher education is, and it's really putting it out there as a commodity in ways that we haven't always thought about it before, but we can't ignore at the same time. And really, college completion is really at the center of this. So what I said is not without controversy, right? So there is a lot of criticism out there of what's being put out and what's being moved forward in terms of this. As you can see from the quotes that I just displayed, a scorecard is no way to pick a college. And many of us are really taking time to pause and think about this because, as I talked about earlier, we have so many different types of students coming to our institutions from so many walks of life. And the idea that we're going to measure all of them in an identical way doesn't seem very fair all the time, and doesn't really seem logical at times when we're trying to do our best to educate students. At the same time, we have to deal with the realities that's out there. But I guess I always go back, when I think about this, to what's at the core, what's at the purpose. So when I think about what's at the purpose, I got to be a part of a profession once upon a time, and I'm so fortunate to be there, that's all about students succeeding, that's all about changing lives, and that's all about helping students find a more purposeful purposeful direction through college education. So I'm one of the lucky ones. And even though I have to be aware of all the things that come into play, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute, I'm so fortunate because at the core of it, when you take all of it away, it's about helping people be successful. And I have gotten to do that for my career. So when I think of it in that way, I really comes back to center of what it's all about. So when I think about what this means for student affairs, I think it's always important to remember that we've got to serve all the populations. We've got to know who's coming to our institution. We've got to know how we can help make them successful from the first point of contact. One of the things we're really thinking about on my campus is how do we help those in distance education. You know, we know that for distance learners, some of the critical factors are similar. In fact, for a distance learner, their critical time is to make it through the first 3 courses, to make it through that first course and then complete 2 others. If they get on that track, we know that they have a really good chance of success. So how do we play a role in that? And I think as a profession, we have to think about how we're playing a role with every population, because the high school graduate population, the 18-year-olds that we started with in the enrollment continuum, are not the entire college-going population anymore, and actually it's a shrinking part of the market, and we want to help everyone be successful. I also know as a student affairs practitioner that I always have to be aware that enrollment is part of the financial security of the institution. That means that when we're planning things and when I'm helping plan in areas, whether that's housing or dining or working with admissions or wherever, that how many students we enroll, how we plan to enroll, and how we create a budget is really important. And it is part of the financial security of an institution to have strong enrollment planning. I want to think about always as a student affairs practitioner how it all connects. One of the great things when we think about strong enrollment management, strategic enrollment management planning, is it really is about partnership. When we're helping students be successful, many times you'll hear people say, well, to help a student graduate, it's all about how we offer courses or when we offer them or what's happening in the classroom, how important something is that's happening in the classroom. And then somebody else will say, no, it's if they're served well, if people give them good service, if people are offering good service, if people are making it affordable. And then you'll hear someone else say, oh, it's about how we engage them. It's about how we develop them. And really, the truth is it's about all of it. And one of the best things I see about the college completion agenda and strong enrollment management is when we partner, because it connects academic with financial viability, with what we do every day as student affairs practitioners or enrollment practitioners, and it leads on the journey to student success. And then this last item I want to talk about is one that I'm really passionate about for those of us in student affairs, student enrollment, student services in general, is that we really have to assess for relevance. You know, when we think about being at the table and showing the value of what we do in assessment, there's so many ways that we have evolved. You know, once upon a time when we thought about assessment, we thought about we wanted to check the box to see if students had good customer service. And that's very important for students to have good customer service. But we also decided it had to evolve a bit. Were students learning things through the activities that we provided them? Were they learning? And we started to assess that, and that's very important as well. We also began to assess, are they engaging with our institutions? And all of those things are extremely important in assessment. But one of the things that I go back to when I think about the success continuum is those are vehicles. And the vehicles are driving towards student success. And so many times, I think, in assessment for relevance, we forget to assess for some pragmatic outcomes. Did the activity, the program, did what we're assessing, did that help a student retain? Did that help a student progress? Did that help a student with their time to degree? Did that help a student enhance their performance in the classroom? Did that help a student graduate? Did that help a student beyond graduation with their post-graduation career outcomes? That's the piece of assessment that I think we've got to make sure we tie in. At ODU, we have swipes where you take your ID and you swipe into events. And we can tell who's going to events and how they're progressing at the university. So we can not only measure, are they learning, are they engaging, which are very important, but we're also measuring, are they also retaining, progressing, and graduating. And this is a really important part of connecting to enrollment, connecting to college completion, and really showing how student affairs connects into the enrollment continuum. I'm one of those that really thinks enrollment helps you bring it all together and how we connect across the student life cycle. And I believe that student affairs is a really important key to that. This was a very broad overview that I just gave you, and I know that by no means we could spend a day on many of the topics alone. So this is just a teaser or something to get started, but hopefully helps you see a bit more about the basic pieces of enrollment management and also how student affairs ties into that. At this point, I think we have about 12 minutes, and I wanted to see if there were any questions that I could answer or any discussion items that somebody wanted to bring forward.
Thank you, Ellen. This is Matt. I'm just going to join and echo the question comment, and you can use the chat window, which is on the right of your screen, to type in any questions that you have or comments that are helpful. And if you select send to all panelists or all participants, that way we can, all panelists rather, and we can answer those questions as they come in.
Well, Matt, do you have a question?
I don't, Ellen. You have covered it all. Again, the questions that you can submit are on the chat window right there on the right side of your screen. Ooh, there we go. Thank you, Doug. Maybe talk a little bit more, Ellen, about institutional budget constraints and how this impacts enrollment management.
Yeah, and
again, while Ellen's answering that question, as Kim has done, and Brian have submitted other questions, you can feel free to submit those while we're responding to others.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up budget constraints with enrollment, and it's so timely if you happen to be in the Commonwealth of Virginia right now, as so many of our colleagues often do, talking about possible budget reductions in our state. When you think about enrollment, there's a couple of things we think about during a time of budget constraint. Many our private partners already know this, that enrollment really for many of us, is the basis of our budget. So those students and budgets are becoming more and more what we call enrollment driven. So when we bring dollars into a university, we've got private funds, auxiliary funds, which I mentioned, like things like housing and dining, things of that nature. If you're in a state school, the support the states give you, as well as the enrollment dollars. As you're in a time of budget cuts, the enrollment dollars become ever more important to keeping the institution abreast. And in a time, if I think about in a time of cutting, when you're showing, when you've been asked to cut your budget, many times what you show is connected to the completion agenda. What you show is connected to helping students be successful will be the things, depending on your institution, that you'll probably be more focused on keeping in a budget and sometimes having to cut others. All right. Matt,
sorry, Ellen. Oh, we've got a couple more. So,
okay.
Let me see. What student populations do you think are the most at risk of not persisting from first to second year? And in addition to the out-of-state, in addition to what you already mentioned as far as out-of-state or financial need situations. So beyond out-of-state or financial need, is there an at-risk population from a persistence from first year to second year? That is from Brian Samble.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, if we think about different institutions may have different aspects depending on your institution and what you see from your data. But if we look if we look nationally, and I know I'm being a little bit repetitive, but socioeconomic status, there's a very strong correlation with that and persistence of lack thereof. And that has, if you go through different socioeconomic quartiles, and I don't have that with me today, but you can take a look at that and see that those students that come from families with lower income are much less likely to persist. That also seems to go hand in hand with college preparedness. So one of the big arguments that's out there in general, or debates, is that higher education, we really have to look at, are we perpetuating a socioeconomic divide if we're not providing access? Another population that's really important, and I didn't mention earlier, is the first generation. Students that have not had a parent that has attended college. So they're the first one in the family to attend college. That's a student that's also at risk. And there's a lot there in the idea that those students have not had anybody that's shown the way or that can give them the same support at home, even though they may get great support from their parents. They have not been through it themselves. And there's lots of studies on there from different folks on how to make sure we target and help these students particularly. I'll end there.
Okay, how much time do we have? We've got a few more minutes.
Yes.
Let's see. What ideas have you developed to assist in the internalization of your campus? International. That's Tamika.
The internationalization, or
I'm going to go with that. Yes.
Okay. On our campus, one of both the international students and the internationalization of our campus is very important. We have a strong study abroad program. I got the opportunity to be a part of a first-year inaugural study abroad for freshmen before they began school this year, and they got to go ahead and gain 7 credits, get well on their way to time to degree, engage with a nice small group, which we know is part of success, and study abroad. We have a lot of programs from our Office of Intercultural Relations that really help us understand people from different cultures and backgrounds, and we have close to 1,000 international students that come to the campus each year that really help us look in a broader way at different cultures. I think it is one of the an important, very important aspect of education and learning, and really enhances the learning environment. One of the things on a campus, no matter how many international students you have or how much opportunity you have to study abroad, some of the programming that you can do is really key in making sure that we help our students learn about different cultures. And while I certainly can't take direct credit, here at Old Dominion, our Office of Intercultural Relations make sure that we have many different events where we can learn about, celebrate, and respect different cultures from around the globe. And that's part of the world that we will all be in, especially our graduates. So it's a really important part, and it can be done in many different ways.
Okay, maybe the last question is from Kim Miller. Rightfully so. I think marketing services to students that students do not realize are available to them is a potential aid to retention, but maybe others aren't using those comprehensively. Can you talk a little bit about what you all have done at ODU or what you've seen elsewhere on internal marketing to students as far as retention services once they're on campus?
I think Kim brings up such an important point. Whether it's on my campus or campuses I've been on in the past, one of the things that's so important is that we always think about all the services that we have, and somehow we have so many students that are not finding them. And I think that's, in many cases, a universal problem. Obviously, one of the things that is important to us at ODU is making sure that we do a lot as we transition students in. So with our transition programs, making students are not only aware that we have the services, but really having that conversation about the fact that these are their services, but they need to be assertive in reaching out to them. Another aspect that has been very important to us is obviously social media and student peers. Again, we have so many different populations at Old Dominion. There is not a one-size-fits-all. So whether we're using our residence halls and residence hall programming, or we're putting something out to our online students, or having a military orientation, or offering services through our Military Connection Center, a one-size-fits-all approach has never been something that I have seen that worked, especially when you have a diverse student body. The other thing is that I have learned is it's never there's never a key to saying, oh well, we told them, or it's to tell them and tell them again, and make sure that we're working with our faculty partners so that they can refer and be a part of that as well. It's really got to be a part of the campus culture that we know what our services are and are putting them out across the campus. And I will say that no matter where I've been, we've never mastered that completely, but that's something we've always got to keep working on.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I think that's all the questions that have come in, and additionally, we are quite close to time, and I want to be conscious about commitments that everybody has at their campuses. So anything else you want to close with, Ellen?
I just really want to thank everybody for joining us today for the conversation about enrollment management, and I want to thank Doug for asking me to present. And I really want to encourage everybody to be at the SACSA conference to see us all at Louisville. We're going to be celebrating with our past presidents. It's going to be a conference like no other since Matt put it together. And so I hope all of you will register today for the SACSA conference in Louisville, November 1st through 3rd.
Thank you. And you've just stolen my thunder, but go for it.
Sorry.
No. Again, be at the conference, everyone. That's one of the many distinct benefits of being a member of SACSA. I want to thank Doug Searcy again for organizing everything, and to everyone for being present. And of course, to thank Ellen, who has obviously provided great leadership for SACSA as an organization and provided some really great content today as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.